Deep inside the forest, a young woman named Carmen is covered in blood as she struggles really hard to unzip herself by trying to cut the zip tie tying her wrists. Few moments later, in a creepy way, she repeats the word murder maker continuously and immediately continue to free herself. Fortunately for her, she escapes. The scene then shifted to a farm nearby, where we get to meet Maggie and her son Arlo capturing a wasp in a teacup, which really made her son happy. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Maggie's mother-in-law Ellen hears the radio make a weird piercing noise that really affects her. Outside their home, Maggie met with her husband named James, who asked her if she had made peace with his mom, which she promised she would. Maggie went out and released the wasp while her son watched from distance. Afterwards, Maggie went straight to the stables, where the horses are all freaking out upon her arrival. Back to Arlo, he sees a goat escaping into the woods and decided to go after it while Carmen watches him from behind the trees. Nightfall, and Maggie decided to have a conversation with James more. Maggie headed straight to her son's room and couldn't find him. So she asked her daughter about Arlo, but she had no idea. Nobody has seen him, but they believe he is hiding for fun, which he does often. Just then, their neighbor Reuben and his family shows up with their horse, who has been freaking out seriously and even hurt his head in the process. However, since Maggie is a vet, she decided to take the horse to her clinic with Reuben, while the others stay to look for her son Arlo. That same radio continued the screeching noise again, and Reuben's son Nicholas mentions he also heard it earlier today in the car. Meanwhile, Meryl also noticed that a goat in their farm is missing, and Reuben's wife, Valeria, shares that another neighbor was missing a dog too. Deep into the forest, Arlo is still following the goat when suddenly Carmen walked behind him, reciting a weird words in Spanish and English. Nearby, Meryl Reuben are now in the forest in search of Arlo. Just then, Meryl heard a noise. At the clinic, Maggie discovered a huge splinter in the horse's body, but thankfully it didn't cut through any blood vessels. James and Valeria are also searching, while discussing their old affair, which Maggie doesn't know about. However, they're interrupted by their kid, who have found the missing dog and the goat. A loud noise was soon heard, and immediately they see some animal run by. Somewhere deep into the forest, Arlo is now unconscious. As soon as he gained consciousness, he finds Carmen roaring at his face. Suddenly, a rainbow light appears on her eyes, which also appeared on Arlo's eyes too. James and the teen got back to the house while Donald and his wife, Claire, show up to take back their dog named Duke. Maggie asked James for their son, but they still have no idea. Just then, Arlo arrived and he began to speak same nonsense as Carmen, before he collapsed. Inside the woods, Carmen is now begging for help, when all of a sudden, the beast finds her and kills her. A person in a gas mask then sprays a line of blue paint on the street. Back to James and his family. They began to notice the lights in the house flickering, and the dogs won't stop barking at the woods, even their vehicles won't start. They check their phones and nothing like signal to make calls. Inside the house, Meryl checks Arlo, and he speaks English for the first time after the incidents. He does not know what had happened to him, and suddenly he began to laugh. Meryl believed he was just faking the whole situation, and they all laughed it out. Maggie does not believe her son is faking it, as from his injuries, he looked like someone had dragged him. Maggie stylishly asked Meryl to leave so she can have a private moment with Arlo. And she asked him if he knew the person who had attacked him, and he replied no. But later on, he said he do know one thing, which is he need to go. Maggie doesn't agree, and suddenly he began repeating the weird words, including murder maker. Then he tries to run away and bumps against Nicholas, causing him to bleed from his head. James and Reuben prepared their horses to enter town for help when they notice a car on the road with the lights on. They ran towards it and met the masked man, who makes a gesture to make them freeze before pointing at the blue line on the ground. Then he holds up a board which says, "Don't cross the line." James tries to explain the situation and ask for help, only for the man to take out a gun to warning them. Meanwhile, while Maggie was treating Arlo, he grabbed a scissors trying to attack his mom, which was unsuccessful, while he kept on repeating those weird words. She eventually disarmed him, and just then Arlo became weak. He told his mom that he is really scared as he does not know what is happening to him. Arlo sings along with his mom as he puts a bunch of marbles on the floor and places an inverted teacup on top of them. Deep into the woods, Donald kept on searching when he suddenly trips on something, which happens to be Carmen's body. Suddenly, the beast arrived while standing and growling close to Donald's weapon. Donald tried walking away slowly, but it chases after him. Back to the masked man, He painted a new drawing on the board that reveals the blue line as a circle surrounding the area. But when James tries approaching him again, the man fires a warning shot. Fortunately for Donald, he got to where James and the masked man was, but unluckily for him, Donald couldn't go through the fence to escape and sadly falls to the ground. The dog jumps on him to attack. Donald eventually fight off the dog, making him fall across the blue line. The men watched in shock as the dog's bones start coming out of his body until he dies. The masked man then puts his board up again, reminding them not to cross the line. James requested for an explanation, but the masked man only writes, "Don't trust anyone," and then leaves in his vehicle. Meanwhile, at the house, Claire informed the others that she's going home with her dog because she has a landline phone that could help make an emergency call. The men were on their way back when they saw her coming out, so they try to warn her, but it's too late. As the dog runs away from the line in fear, Claire crosses it and her bones snap out, killing her immediately in few seconds, which also affected Donald as he tried pulling her back. Meanwhile, after pointing at the word trap on a dictionary, Arlo tells Maggie that the man in his head is telling them to hide because it's coming and it kills everything in its way. The next day, Donald stares at his wife's body in shock. She met with James, and during their conversation, Maggie too reveals to James that she is aware of his affair with Valeria, which Reuben overheard. James admits it's true, but insists that the affair is long over, and he loves Maggie. He also apologized, but it was not enough. Much later, Reuben doesn't tell anyone that he knows, including his wife Valeria. Reuben then gives Maggie a gun before joining James for the trip using their horses. On their way, they found a snake which had died earlier in a traumatizing way. At home, Meryl and Nicholas found Arlo with his dictionary, learning some words, so Nicholas went on to ask Arlo who he is, and Arlo replies that he is the Harbinger, while the real Arlo is deep asleep and resting. He informed them that they are trapped and then grabs Meryl's hand as he insists they must hide or die. The Harbinger suddenly got an idea and he says that they aren't truly trapped. He tries to take Meryl out with him, but she doesn't let him. But just then, Arlo wakes up to tell her she must listen to the Harbinger because the assassin is coming. Meanwhile, outside, Valeria is having a conversation with Ellen when all of a sudden, a man arrived with his vehicle just outside the zone. They are shocked that nothing happened to him, so immediately Valeria ran straight to him, warning him not to cross the line, which he did. This made them surprised. He told them that coming from the other side of the zone is not a problem, but going back is a real problem. Meanwhile, Meryl and Nicholas decided to follow Arlo into the woods, but Nicholas came along with his knife to protect them. Arlo, now as the Harbinger, then took them to a spot where they discovered the ground looking a bit burnt with dead animals surrounding it. Suddenly, Harbinger says, "This is mine," and then pointed to the sky, claiming that's where he came from, before finding a rock that contains rainbow-colored liquid and then collects it in a jar. He told them it is poison, but he needs them to drink it, as if they drank just the right amount, they'll be able to walk over the line. But if they drink too much, they'll die. And if they don't drink, the assassin will kill them. Meanwhile, Reuben and James reached the Navarro's house and split to search the area. Unfortunately, James found their neighbor dead body outside. He went into the building and found more dead bodies. James walked towards the basement where he eventually got attacked. Meanwhile, Maggie went deep into the wood where she found Carmen's body. Maggie head back home where she meet Olson, who informed that he is aware of what is happening and he is here to assist them. Maggie told about what she saw in the wood, so Olson explains his job was to find and isolate Carmen. He asked if any other person had come into contact with Carmen while she was alive, and when he heard about Arlo, he asked to see him immediately. Back to the wood, Meryl asked the Harbinger to bring Arlo out, which he did. She then asked her brother about the entity's motives, and he says the Harbinger is on a secret mission. Before she could ask more, they hear a car and run away. Meanwhile, Olson informed Maggie that he is a cop, and he is also part of a task force made up of cops, Army, and Marines. All they know is that some kind of vibration is outside the line, which complex organisms like animals and humans can't survive. A suspicious Maggie wonders if Olson's task force had killed Carmen, but he swore he just got here, but obviously she doesn't believe him. Olson finally admits he lied and says the only way for them to survive is taking him to her son and attacked her immediately. This ended up badly as Maggie knocked him out and tied him up. She informed Valeria that Olson was lying, and just then, Valeria realizes Maggie knows about the affair and swears it was already over. Just then, Olson gained consciousness and asked for Arlo, saying they're running out of time. Maggie leaves immediately while Olson tried to talk Valeria into believing he's here to help. But then again, they're interrupted by Ellen, who still can't find the kids. Valeria leaves Ellen in charge of watching Olson. Maggie, now at the point of breakdown, is in serious tears before Donald came to comfort her. Deep into the wood, the kids came across a different masked man who reminds them not to cross the line. Unfortunately for them, he saw the jar and requested they hand it over to him, but when they refuse, the masked man then attacked Nicholas, and after a serious struggle, Nicholas mistakenly stabs him while the jar falls and breaks. Merrill rushes to cover the guy's wound and removes his mask, causing him to recognize the Harbinger as the being that had been inside Carmen's. The masked man swears he's here to help the Harbinger. Meanwhile, Olson begged Ellen to help him wipe his blood out, so as she proceeded doing so, he then made eye contact with Ellen and thereby transferring the entity to her. Now possessed, Ellen shoots Olson dead. Then he made the setting look like he had attacked her. Nearby, Jane's gained consciousness, but confronted by an injured masked teen named Travis, who asked James to give him a good reason not to shoot him.